So the narrative that Bitcoin was designed to be anti-establishment, deal with the response to the financial crisis, that it's supposed to be digital gold, a store of value, is really undermined by reading the white paper, which almost no one does. It was not meant to be, let's buy a bunch of Bitcoin and hold it, hoping it goes up in price and we get rich. It was designed to be a payment system for daily life across the internet, peer to peer, for, as it says in the white paper, small, casual payments.
Welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone to another episode of Tech Talks. Today we have with us a very special guest. Okay, I always butcher the last name, so can you tell us how to properly pronounce your last name?
Well, I'll give you the brand I use now is Jimmy Nguyen, like the word win. But if you're in
Okay.
Vietnam, it's Nguyen, but that's tough for people to say. So it's actually become my personal calling card and brand. I'm Jimmy Nguyen.
Okay, so we have with us Jimmy Nguyen. Thank you very much. That makes my life easier. Jimmy Nguyen is a leading figure in blockchain and emerging technology, renowned for founding New Win Global, hence Win. He collaborates on innovative projects worldwide, emphasizing the synergy of technology and humanity. Active in major markets, his initiatives cover the metaverse, stablecoins, blockchain-based invoice financing, and digital media. Committed to supporting developing countries, he's also a motivational speaker. Currently, he spearheads Meta Center, chairs Invoice Mate. By the way, I met I met the CEO of
The,
Invoice
chief,
Mate, Mohammed
the chief
Salman.
mate,
Yes, the
Mohammed
chief
Salman
mate.
Al
There you go.
Zoom, the CEO,
I
chief
met
mate.
him. I met him last year at Future Fest in Pakistan. I remember he was moderating my panel. Anywho, shares Invoice Mate and Change Digital Commerce, contributing significantly to blockchain and AI-driven financial solutions. With a distinguished legal career, he led the BSV Blockchain Association and N-Chain Group. Recognized as a top influencer in crypto, Jimmy's accolades extend to diversity advocacy. He holds degrees from UCLA and USC Law Center. Go Bruins. Tell us, Jimmy, this was the official biography. Tell us the unofficial story.
Well, the unofficial story that informs a lot of what I do today is I'm an immigrant and refugee from Vietnam to the United States. And I was born in Vietnam, and my father was a federal judge in South Vietnam who had worked his way out of rural, poor areas to rise to that level. And then we fled Vietnam the night before it fell in April of 1975 at the end of the war there, and were helped out by the US government and resettled into Southern California, where I grew up in the LA area. So I'm a very LA person, even though people don't realize I was actually born in Vietnam. But that informed a lot of my early life experience, being one of the first Southeast Asian immigrants to the town we lived in Southern California, being a minority. There were not that many Asian people in our neighborhoods when I was growing up, certainly not in media, in business and law, which is the career I chose. So I think growing up, I always felt a little bit different as an outsider. And it led me to realize later in life that instead of trying to do things to fit in with the rest of the world, we achieve success and wins by really standing out and being distinctive. And it's led me to a lot of the career I have now, which is using technology to help developing countries. Because the life I have, which led to becoming a lawyer at the height of the Silicon Valley boom and practicing law for 21 years as a partner in big corporate law firms, and leading to the journey I have now in blockchain and other technology, was only birthed because I was in a situation where my family were taken to the United States, where I had the educational resources and platform and career to succeed the way I did. And I feel like every human being around the world should have that opportunity, no matter where they live or the circumstances they're in. And digital technologies are a terrific way to advance that. So my whole career started into the internet.com boom of the 1990s, and I represented startups to some of the biggest conglomerates of the world, from Microsoft, Amazon, Uber, the major movie studios of Hollywood, the Motion Picture Association, sports organizations like Major League Baseball, even the Miss Universe organization at one point. And about 8 years ago, one of my clients formed a big technology company in blockchain in London called Nchain. And that's what led to my journey out of law, where they asked me to take a role, and I eventually became CEO, and then led one of the largest blockchain competing ecosystems in the world called Bitcoin SV or BSV, which is using the Bitcoin protocol to scale bigger and actually make blockchain useful for data applications, not just for crypto trading. And that's what led me to starting to travel around the world as being a blockchain evangelist, including in the Middle East, where we opened up a hub, and I met my now business partner, Mohammed Samanajum. So I did that for about 8 years, and then last year left to form my own set of ventures and business initiatives under my brand, Nguyen Global, which is really about combining innovation and inspiration to achieve wins in the world.
Fantastic. That's an awesome story. So you call yourself a blockchain evangelist, and I'm convinced you are one. And you've been all around the world. What
Yes.
do you see as some of the common misconceptions in our region in the Middle East regarding the blockchain?
We'll be right back after the break.
Tekka Talks brings you stories from around the world that will help you understand how crypto and Islamic finance can change our lives for the better. Subscribe and follow us to keep learning.
Sure. Well, the biggest one I encounter, especially because I talk a lot and engage a lot with government agencies, which most cryptocurrency people are not doing, because most of the early Bitcoin crypto supporters are what I would call cypherpunks. They are anti-establishment. They think Bitcoin blockchain was designed to take down government and take down banks. I come at it from a completely opposite viewpoint. I worked at the rise of one major data technology, was the internet, and saw that it only grew in usage to change our lives the way it does now by governments, big business, institutional investors getting comfortable with the internet. And that's why we have an amazing, robust internet ecosystem that we have today. So the biggest misconception that I think has hindered and slowed down the growth of blockchain, especially by government entities, is that it's just for bad crypto activity. That cryptocurrency is used just for illegal activity, that it's used for money laundering, that cryptocurrency is all speculative, and there's nothing good about it. People are starting to realize there's a separation between blockchain as the underlying data technology and realizing that cryptocurrency is just one use case of it. But the reality is, and I'm sure you've encountered this as well, people's resistance to cryptocurrency has slowed down really good usage of blockchain. It's also sucked up what I call all the oxygen out of the industry, the media attention, and investment dollars going to just the fast crypto trading type products and ventures. And people like your company building products that are delivering good usage using tokens or blockchain technology for good, it takes longer to do, and it's not as fast of a profit as investing in something with a cute token or NFT of a cat picture and getting it traded and making money. So it's the association with crypto, I think, that has slowed things down, and that takes a lot of work and communication around the world, and people delivering real good products with real good usage, real good results that will change that perception.
That's very cool. So you talk about your engagements with government agencies. Now, when you go and you meet somebody for the first time, generally government people are not the youngest bunch. How would you go about describing the blockchain to them in a way that makes sense to them?
Sure. I describe blockchain as a new form of data network that that is distributed, so not one person controls the data and how you can access data, and that publishes verifiable pieces of information so that everyone across the world can see the same data set, so that we can trust it more, so that we can make data and payments more efficient because there's fewer people in the middle of it, and so that we can create products that are more self-automating, self-executing. And that all stems from having a network of data that keeps tracks of events in history, because that's all really blockchain does, and what the Bitcoin's white paper described, a distributed timestamp server, where we're keeping track of events in history. I send you a digital token payment. I purchase a vehicle, sell it to you, and record the title registry change at a certain date and time. And that information is public for the world to see, verify, interact with, and therefore it makes it harder to change or to cheat. So it's just a different way of keeping and tracking the data of chronological events in history over time, and that unleashes some really powerful good uses.
So, my story with the blockchain and with cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, etc., is really coming out of the 2008 financial crisis. So, Bitcoin, the original blockchain, was born out of this anti-establishment push, right? This concept of let's find another way away from centralized authority to create our own money. Now, how do you reconcile this with government people?
Yeah, that's where I would slightly disagree with you. I think that's the narrative that took hold about Bitcoin, that it was born out of the financial crisis. I remember that at the time I was a lawyer, at the time, of course, a lot of my clients suffered in the financial crisis. And because it emerged in the white paper was published in 2008, and the blockchain began with its Genesis block in January of 2009, and because of the original message with an article, from one of the UK newspapers that was embedded in the Genesis block, people took that as the mission of Bitcoin to, have this sort of anti-establishment form of money. And there is some truth to that. And there were efforts before Bitcoin by other groups to create other forms of electronic cash, by communities of technologists that have that ethos. If you read the Bitcoin white paper itself, however, and the early notes around the Bitcoin software, it doesn't talk about that at all. It talks about a very simple mission to create a more efficient means of peer to peer internet payments that require less intermediaries and therefore are cheaper, so that I could send across the internet, me to you, anywhere in the world, even a small amount of money without a payment processor or other service provider in the middle. To really change the internet's functionality, how the internet grew is there was no method built into internet protocol natively to send payments. We can send data across the internet from device to device for email or this streaming of this video recording. But there was not a way built in natively to send a payment. So we had to layer on top of internet protocol all of these service providers. That led to the birth of an internet where we get a lot of free services and content, such as Facebook or social media or YouTube, but that we have to sit through advertising, or the services sell our data in order to make money, or subscription services. Because there wasn't a way to pay, let's say, for a single newspaper article to read. I don't like to pay for newspaper subscriptions digitally, but I would pay 10, 20 US cents per article I read. Or I would pay, for example, for every time I streamed a song on Spotify as opposed to a subscription. But the payment mechanism for that is not available because credit card payment processing fees are too high. There's a minimum for every transaction, and therefore you cannot have micro payment capabilities on the internet. So the Bitcoin white paper describes an attempt to solve that problem by delivering a system that, because you didn't have intermediaries there in the middle, I could peer to peer send you not big amounts of money, but small amounts of
We'll be
money.
right back after the break.
We believe that the financial system is broken and that our banks and insurance companies don't have our best interests at heart. We've built Takadao to help us get together as a community to save, earn, and access credit. Join us today and discover how you can grow your savings while helping others.
Amounts of money. So the narrative that Bitcoin was designed to be anti-establishment, deal with the response to the financial crisis, that it's supposed to be digital gold, a store of value, is really undermined by reading the white paper, which almost no one does. It was not meant to be, let's buy a bunch of Bitcoin and hold it, hoping it goes up in price and we get rich. It was designed to be a payment system for daily life across the internet, peer to peer, for, as it says in the white paper, small, casual payments.
It's actually very interesting what you're saying, actually, Jimmy. So, of course, now I want you to wear your lawyer cap. And we all know that Satoshi is an unknown entity. So and there's a lot of people who are skeptical also, especially in the part of the world where we are, where why is it that we don't know who's the founder behind and stuff like that. Can you, enlighten our community here and on the one of the reason or many reason why Satoshi should stay anonymous and why he should not, or the opposite?
Oh, well, you've walked into a hot button topic. Uh, first of all, there's a contingent of the Bitcoin world, including the Bitcoin SV community, which I led for quite some years, that believes Satoshi is Dr. Craig Wright, who's an Australian computer scientist, who was the chief scientist of the company I led. A lot of people disagree and think he is a fraud. You'll read that all over the internet. Personally, I do believe he is Satoshi and was the chief architect of Bitcoin's design. I, however, don't really care at this point in my life about whether people believe that. The reason Satoshi was pseudonymous in the first place was that the prior attempts at creating electronic cash failed, and some of those people got in trouble with governments. And I understand that to address Shireen's earlier question, why would governments like Bitcoin? And this is why a lot of governments for many years were very resistant to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, because central banks historically have had the power to issue fiat currency, right? To issue and control money and money circulation, and to regulate payments, money transmission. Those are all regulated activities in most countries. And so I absolutely understand and acknowledge that how governments initially had this reaction to Bitcoin as a threat to their ability to control and manage the monetary systems of their countries. And also to manage and control funds transfers and flow in and out of countries, because Bitcoin is not geographically bound in that way. So Satoshi was pseudonymous in the beginning because, especially when this launched in 2008, 2009, it was not in vogue to be creating your own cryptocurrency, right? No one necessarily wanted to be the face of a system that was designed specifically to be a payment method. It wasn't arguing at the time we are a store of value, we're a utility token, as you hear about today in the investment world. It was this is a new form of electronic cash payment system. So now I think most of the governments of the world, even if they don't love cryptocurrency, are acknowledging that the digital asset and blockchain world is here to stay. And I told many governments, I understand why your central bank or your Ministry of Finance may be concerned about this, but you're losing out on huge both tax revenue, and also your entrepreneurs and business community are having more difficult times engaging with the global world economy that's embracing these technologies. And if you want to enlighten your countries with stronger technology businesses, then the best answer is to regulate it. Governments and law enforcement agencies across the world are getting better at detecting crime on blockchains and with cryptocurrencies. So the answer in my mind is to regulate it, to allow businesses to operate within your countries, including exchanges, service providers in the digital asset space, and license them, govern them appropriately. And then hopefully you'll get the bad actors out of the way and encourage a world with just good actors, or at least better actors. So I will say that I fully understand their reticence, but many countries, especially the developing ones, are seeing digital technologies, including blockchain, as a way to help the young generation get skills, build businesses faster, and try to catch up with the rest of the world. And so there's great value in that. And I finally will say that I think this world we have of too many cryptocurrencies, 25,000 of them, most of whom don't really accomplish much. I think that world will come to an end at some point. I think that is waning. I'd like to see it happen faster, than later. But I think the world will eventually migrate to better uses of blockchain.
I have a question. So you and I we both want the same things. We want mass adoption of the blockchain and Web3, and in my case, certain types of cryptocurrencies and uses of tokens. But we have a different approach. So you talk to government, so it's a top-down kind of approach, and we have a more grassroots, bottoms-up kind of approach. And you've been around the world. Where do you see the next real mass adoption coming from? Is it going to be a top-down led effort, or is it going to be bottoms-up?
Right. And it depends on what kind of mass adoption we're talking about. I think the crypto world mistakes crypto trading as mass adoption. Ooh, there's a lot of traders. So a lot of the countries I work and travel in, such as Vietnam, Pakistan, Nigeria, are three of the key, as well as doing quite a bit of work in the Middle East, especially based out of Dubai and some increasingly in the Saudi kingdom. I see people count trading volumes and Bitcoin crypto wallet numbers as proof of adoption. I think that's a type of adoption, but it's not really the kind of adoption I want to see, which is, are people taking digital assets and cryptocurrencies and using them for payments? Are they using them for games? Are they using them to stake, such as your products, for a community pool of insurance or savings that's Sharia compliant? I think using digital tokens, digital currencies for that purpose is a fantastic example of real adoption, rather than just I have coins and I trade them, right, to make money. So in terms of that kind of adoption, I don't see as much of it anywhere, to be honest, that I would like. I would say the countries that there are countries that are top in trading, such as Vietnam, Nigeria, Pakistan are really three of some of the tops. Turkey is, for example, is another one. In terms of the countries that I think are being most aggressive and progressive about is Nigeria in Africa, the most biggest economy of Africa. I was just there a few weeks ago in Abuja to lead a delegation of companies, friends of mine, about 12 people, to the Digital Nigeria conference that's run annually by the government there. So I spoke there and tried to broker a lot of business opportunities for the delegation of companies that I brought with me. They have a very progressive leader, Kashifu Enewa Abdullahi of the National IT Development Agency, who's super knowledgeable about blockchain. And as a leader, he is devoting a lot of resources to training, education of the young people. They've adopted a national blockchain policy, the first ever in the world, which is a comprehensive government effort to have government agencies use blockchain, support blockchain education, develop programs to incentivize creation of startups in the country. They've just launched a whole startup portal. So that kind of comprehensive effort, I think, will lead to more blockchain adoption in that country. But it's, it still hasn't happened to the degree I think any of us would like to see. That's probably the most comprehensive government and effort I've seen, backed up by some private initiatives. Vietnam is my native country, has a very big, robust young generation of entrepreneurs in blockchain, Web3, NFTs. But the usage is more limited to that kind of game trading sort of asset area, less so on the enterprise blockchain use, something that I'm trying to change there. So those are some examples where I think things are happening the fastest. And in the Middle East, the UAE and increasingly Saudi is having a really big government push to try and support ventures and programs that use blockchain technology. But I haven't seen it in practice in daily life as much as I think any of us would like.
Switching gears a little bit to regulation, as you talked about, that's one of the areas you think most. I think a lot of development can take place, and it will actually push blockchain adoption. Now, it seems clear to me certain activities on cryptocurrencies, centralized exchanges, etc., are more or less easy to regulate, and there's an existing framework, and it kind of makes sense because you can match it to what exists today. But what about DeFi? What about projects that don't fit in the traditional framework? And I bring this up because we deal with regulators constantly, and every time we explain to them what we do, what they say to us is, well, you guys are not really a financial services company because you don't custody the funds, you don't control it, but you are a technology services company. So how do you see that developing over there?
And it's an excellent question. And with some of the companies that I'm chairman of or involved in with a stake in, we confront the same questions. Some businesses like yours may not fit into a neat box. And lawyers, regulators, I can tell you, law, we like to put things in boxes, right? That's the whole point of it. And so fintech businesses, especially in the DeFi world, don't fit neatly into boxes. The best recommendation I often make to regulators as well as companies trying to play in that space is to see if governments have sandbox programs, because then it allows them to support, encourage, and allow products that are new to exist and thrive in their marketplace without having to pass full comprehensive legislation. So one of the companies I know in South Africa is part of the South African regulatory sandbox for fintech. It has a Bitcoin wallet, but it also has a separate product which uses the digital currency as the basis for remittance across 8 African countries to reduce the cost significantly for a flat rate of 50 South African rand. This is called minute money. You can send, which is about $2.70 any amount of money, big or small, to 8 other African countries, which is significantly less than paying 8 to 10% of what you're sending in remittance fees. So they're in a regulatory sandbox program to do this because they didn't fit neatly into, well, what are you? Because they're not sending across the lines actual fiat currency. It's sort of, digital currency that's being sent and then exchanged on endpoints into fiat currency. So I think you're facing a very legitimate question. I would say with DeFi, what I tell regulators is, look, you cannot really regulate the technology. You regulate actors in the technology. We saw this with the internet space. People, they're like, well, we can't regulate the internet. No, but you can regulate the actors, the service providers, the YouTubes, the Googles, the Twitters. With DeFi, first of all, I don't think there's ever going to be fully decentralized finance. We're going to have less centralized finance. I call it like LeFi or LeCFi, whatever you want to call it. Because as long as there's a company behind putting out the product that may provide matching between and self-execution of a financial product, whether it be a loan or staking or or anything else, there is some centralization. It's never going to be completely decentralized. And I think what the best thing regulators can do is try to figure out whether you fit into existing financial regulatory boxes, such as custodying assets, such as paying interest, right, where you might qualify for what would be bank regulated activity. And if you don't, then that's a tougher call. I don't have any neat answer to that. I wish I did, but that's why sometimes I urge them to create regulatory sandboxes so they don't have to exactly answer that right away, while at least allowing startups to build, to grow, because otherwise, you have a deterrent to even building in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Follow up on that, Jimmy. So where do you see the leading nation that could take advantage of this technology? As you know, blockchain is very transparent, it's open. You get rid of all the possible audit that costs an arm and a leg, and I don't want to, blame those people who are making tons of money editing business and so on and so forth. Because now we have an open ledger, we have an access, central access. Where do you see this happening in terms of, is it the South nation or the North nation who are going to be able to execute on that? We see the example of El Salvador, for example, and Central Africa at one point. So what's your take on that?
Are we talking about the government level?
At the government level, exactly.
For me, the answer to that is very simple. It's the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE. Do you know why? Because when you're trying to migrate entire public sector data systems, passport information, civil records, health records managed by government to blockchain managed systems, it requires having a very strong government at the top. Where in the more westernized countries like the United States, where I am, there's always so much arguing between political parties and Congress and agencies. Implementing wide-scale change is very, very difficult. We can barely get legislation passed, in the United States, right? And so it literally takes countries with both the financial resources, but more importantly, a strong leader or set of leaders who have the authority to say, I want this to happen. Ministries, agencies, go make it happen. And then finding the technology vendors and providers to do it. Because when you think about the full benefit of blockchain is that a lot of data in our world is managed in this transparent, immediately verifiable way, so that we know, for example, if I'm traveling from one airport to another and I needed during the COVID times to verify I had the COVID vaccinations at the appropriate dates and times, that could all be time tracked on a blockchain without having to rely on vaccine cards or a different app in different countries where the data sets are all different. You can break down those data silos and have accurate real-time information using blockchain. But you have to first then take identity information our passport, our national ID number, biometric information, and put that into one place that's blockchain managed. Then you associate it with passport information. Then you associate it with my property title. Then you associate it with vehicle title. Then you associate it with, oh, I got married, and then those records are linked. I had a children, and those records are linked. And so that's a very complicated process. And I have talked with government agencies across the world about that. You can't do it all at once. You have to take little subsets and start piloting in a certain region or certain city. But if you can do that, that would change the world. We would have a much more efficient, verifiable world when people want to make academic credential tracking on blockchain, so it's harder for people to lie about whether they had a educational degree or certification. Terrific. You also have to associate that with identity. So it all starts with identity, right? With even your product, a Takadao, you want to ideally be able to associate and verify people's identity with who's putting, money into these community pools. So I think it takes governments like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the others in the Middle East that are taking such a leadership role in not just wanting the technology. They have governments with, just to be direct, the power to say we want to make this happen without a lot of infighting within, the government or the political parties like we have in the U.S. because then they fight over who's going to fund it, who's going to, pay for it, and I don't foresee this happening at mass scale in the westernized countries anytime soon.
So, if I follow on that, an efficient government would actually become a future world nation if they function properly.
Yes.
That's really interesting tech that I'm getting from you. Now, when it comes to privacy issue, is there a way that this blockchain could still be broken into pieces where the privacy issue is still protected and stuff like that?
I think that is a important and excellent point to consider. I would answer that by saying, and a lot of people express concerns to me about privacy of information that might be blockchain managed. The best thing to understand about that is, even though I'm a huge proponent of blockchain, not everything belongs on a blockchain. And you don't have to actually put all the raw data on a blockchain. If we talk about, let's say, for example, healthcare data, I know some companies have been trying to create systems to manage electronic health records, EHR data on blockchain. That doesn't mean all of my medical records go directly on a blockchain, right? It could mean that blockchains are used to timestamp and verify records that exist off-chain that are accessible through blockchain-powered access functions. And so, in addition to encryption and other privacy methods, I think that's a very important thing to remember. Just because we're talking about blockchain management of access to data and verification of data doesn't mean all of your private information necessarily has to be written to or live directly on chain. That is a delicate balance. And this is where we're in the early days of technology companies trying to design systems that provide this balance. Some types of records are easier to get on chain now. Your educational degrees, because most people publish that information anyways on your LinkedIn profile, which I've seen both of yours, very impressive, right? So so I think we'll see, just like the internet, we saw baby steps for people getting comfortable with doing business on the internet. When e-commerce sites first started, people were very nervous to put their credit card number, right, into a website to pay for something. Now we do it all the time and have it, auto stored in, in a lot of these, browsers. I think the same thing will happen with blockchain, where it'll begin in baby steps with using blockchain for certain types of information that we're less concerned about the privacy of. For example, our COVID vaccination records and certificates. We had to show those all the time. Most people are not that concerned about that. If it's just got your name, date of birth, and when you got vaccinated, your academic credentials and professional certifications. There's a good reason to time track on a blockchain the validity of those. I think we can do that. So I recommend this to both private companies and governments as well. If you want to migrate to blockchain, let's not try to do the whole thing. Let's pick subsets of data that are relatively public, have less privacy concerns, and that are easier to begin to migrate. And then over time, the industry will develop more privacy tools features and people will get more comfortable with it. There's not a magic answer today. If anyone tells you there's a magic answer to protecting privacy and blockchain, there's no magic answer. But there are, I think, incremental steps that can be taken.
Thank you.
I think fundamentally, Jimmy and I and you, Murad, by the way, we have different ways of looking at the blockchain. And I think Jimmy is very much somebody who sees working from within the system and to reform something. And me and you, we're like, we want to just come and crash the entire thing, and we want to like just build something new on top.
And I think it's great that you have that different approach. I think that's the both approaches are important. There's not one that is the perfect one.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyways, let's talk about some real use
Sure,
cases.
yes.
Maybe start by telling us about Invoice Mate, because I told you I met Mohammed Salman last year at the Future Fest in Pakistan, and we had a little conversation. But at the time, it was not doing what it's doing today.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing now?
And I'm sorry I missed Future Fest last year, but I will be there this January. Future Fest in Pakistan, which will be in Lahore, end of January. Plug for my friend Arza Shazam. So Mohammed Salman Ajum is like one of my best, if not my best friend in the Middle East. We met years ago at an investment summit, and he started working with us in the BSV blockchain. His own venture is called Invoice Mate, which when you met him, he was probably talking about their base platform, which uses blockchain for invoice management to track the journey of an invoice on a ledger so that you don't have to do the thing we often have to do in business, which is call someone up and say, hey, you didn't pay my invoice yet. It's like, 30 days out when you pay my invoice. And they'll say, oh, I think it's in our accounts payable. Oh, no, we're not sure we got it to the right email address. We've all had that experience. And so that's a perfect use of blockchain, right? Chronological time stamping, events in history, the journey of an invoice across accounting systems that everyone can see in real time. Perfect use for blockchain. That's good. It's interesting. It's honestly not that exciting. And he has some, good users, including the SALIC agency in Saudi Arabia, the agricultural agency that uses the product for that. But the more exciting thing that's happened, that's opened up much bigger business doors, is using that base platform to verify invoices for what's called invoice financing or invoice factoring. So there's a whole world of banks that lend money to businesses in their unpaid invoices, which is an asset of a business. I have invoices to customers, they haven't been paid, but I need cash faster to pay my employees or run my operating expenses. So some banks, especially in the United States, will lend to SMEs on that. Of course, take a significant interest cut, for doing so. But in the Middle East and in Pakistan, banks have traditionally been very reluctant to do that, even though there are a lot of SMEs there who could use the cash flow. And the reason they are been reluctant to do that is the manual time and effort it would take to verify the invoices, to credit check and risk score the businesses. And so they haven't been willing to do it. Well, because we have this blockchain-based way of verifying and tracking invoices, Mohammed Salman and I and others on his team were able to go to a number of banks and have now signed deals with 11 banks in Pakistan, 2 or 3 in the UAE, and soon we're coming to Saudi Arabia, and expanding to that market next year, where they are willing to provide a pool of money to lend to SMEs. We do the invoice verification and due diligence for them, assign a risk score for each of the invoices and businesses once we have a certain amount of invoice history. And then their banking lending departments, we sort of create a matching marketplace where we do not do the lending ourselves. We verify the invoices. Each bank is different in terms of its risk tolerance. And then they will decide, okay, we'll lend on this invoice, this invoice. The SMEs get cash faster. The banks make a new line of revenue, which is high interest rate on these loans, and we take a cut of the fees. And that is a way we use blockchain with also some AI now to do something useful for SMEs and for the banks. So that program just really began after you met Mohammed Salman, and we launched our first invoice financing marketplaces in Pakistan, I think in July. Now 11 banks and financing institutions are signed up. The Saudi market is our next expansion market. It's headquartered in DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center, and been accepted into a couple of big fintech programs, including one run by the Ministry of Finance in the UAE. So I think we're still early days. but it, in my mind, is a really great use of blockchain in a way that I say this in the best ways is boring. It's not the, oh, we made a cute NFT and we're out there doing something everyone can see. Blockchain at its core is just a plumbing infrastructure for managing tracking data. And it's a perfect example of how using a time stamped mechanism to track and verify the journey and authenticity of invoices, we can reduce fraud, give banks confidence to lend their money to SMEs. They get cash faster, can operate their businesses more, and it's a win for everyone. And I like wins.
Yeah, I love that. It's a very amazing, very good use case. It would be nice also to look at potentially including a Sharia compliance model in some of those countries that you're in, and it should
Bingo.
not be.
Yes. And
Yeah, yeah,
Mohammed Salman already has that on his radar. In fact, he's spoken at several Islamic finance conferences and pitched some ideas there. He's already won some awards for some innovations. So that is coming on the pipeline as well.
yeah.
But on the subject of DeFi, we're now talking about it publicly. Our next phase of product growth in Chapter 3 is going to be more of a Web3 sort of model where we're not going full DeFi. And this is why I saw some similarities to what you're all doing. Right now, with Takadao, right now the lending funds are coming from banks that we do partnerships with. But in the future, we are going to create essentially a crowd-funded model where we create a platform where we invite people from the public to contribute funds through perhaps, let's say, digital tokens, stablecoins, for example, into a pool that we manage and then lend to SMEs through this. So has a similar functionality to your Takadao insurance and savings programs, right? Where it's really community crowdsourced funds that can be used to provide the funding benefits to the ultimate end users. And we also have a plan to fractionalize invoices so that you don't have to lend on a whole invoice. A bank can afford to lend on, someone's $50,000, $100,000, US invoice. But if you have a little bit of money to spare and you want to make a little bit of money, you might be able to lend on 50 US dollars, 100 US dollars worth of invoice because we can fractionalize, an invoice into separate components using blockchain token technology.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting.
I was just saying, amazing. I love it.
It's a win.
Yeah, I think that it's a win, definitely. Okay, that's fantastic. What other use cases for the blockchain have you been seeing that really excite you?
Sure. The things I find most exciting are the things I find that are happening are obviously like things like academic credential certification, because that can help reduce fraud and it's possible to implement. I'm involved with another venture that's launching out of Berlin in the United States, which is using blockchain for a music and IP assets registry. In the world today, there's songwriters. If you read the song credits, there's too many of them on songs, especially hip hop R&B songs. There's sometimes like 8, 10 credited songwriters, and then tracking who they are at any given moment in time, especially if someone passes away, gets married, their estate controls their rights, and then ensuring that they get paid their royalties on song performance and distribution is a very complicated system. And I know from my days as a lawyer in the Los Angeles world, the registries that are used to track this they're not as up to date as you might think. And there's different ones across the world. So that's a great use of blockchain by creating a system where the records of songworks can be associated with identity of multiple people. And then you as a songwriter can have more real-time records of all the songs you have an interest in, the companies that need to know this, let's say Spotify, or music distribution services can more quickly check in real time what is the correct status of songwriter rights. So I think that is another excellent use of blockchain, and anything that is about the tracking of the registry of rights. Doesn't have to be music, vehicle registry, property title registry. We just would like to see more of that in play. I'm also a big believer in stablecoins, which is why I'm helping one of my other friends as chairman of his stablecoin business called Change Digital Commerce, which we're building on the BSV blockchain, because I just want to see if we're going to have a world of crypto, I'd like to see people actually pay for things in it, and not just at your local Starbucks, But in this online world, like I talked about at the beginning, where the internet is changed because we can do micropayments in games or paying per article or paying for every minute of a YouTube video we watch, as opposed to paying one of the subscriptions or paying for example, every chat GBT prompt that we want to enter, as opposed to paying a subscription. There's actually a B2B company already doing that. But most people don't want to accept and use native crypto for payments. They buy it because they're hoping to get rich. And so I think stable coins are an answer to that until we get into a world of more central bank digital currencies. So there are a lot of stable coins on the market, but most of them are not used for real payments. They're used to trade crypto or to send big payments. So one exciting thing I'd like to see more of is use of stable coins pushed for real payments, especially down to micro levels, because that could really change things. When we are incentivizing good behavior, healthy activity, right, managed by Fitbit type devices with, little rewards tokens and payments. So those are some examples of things that I find exciting that could have a real use. And most importantly, take advantage of what are the efficiencies of blockchain. Not everything is better with blockchain, right? Some things are because they need, for example, this micropayment capability.
A quick question also that I know we had a talk, you and I, privately, and mashallah, you were looking at the use case of Takadao, and I wanted to, we had this call, you say, Murad, I'm presenting this day, blah, 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 with a different type of people, and I'd like to present your project and so on and so forth. I don't know if you have the feedback, but it would be great to hear about, if you did present it, Takadao, and what was the feedback and what was the answer? I would love to hear from you.
Sure, so I was on a session in Tangier, Morocco, I guess about 2 weeks ago, this is after I spoke with you. That was at a big policy event. So a lot of government leaders, former government people, and I was asked to speak on a big panel session about digital asset policy. Right. And so we talked about this whole question of how should governments regulate digital assets and blockchain. And basically what I used the opportunity during my time on stage to say exactly what I said here. I understand why governments are afraid of blockchain and digital assets. They should regulate it because what they're missing out on are the good uses of the technology. And I gave 4 or 5, including Takadao. What was the reaction to it? I mean, you're on stage, so you don't get necessarily immediate reaction. But afterwards, when I got off stage, I had a number of people come to me and say, "Oh, we just liked what you had to say. We liked your speech. But your company and invoice mate were the things that I think resonated a lot with them. One, I think there were a lot of Muslim audience members, right? And so the idea of using the historic concept of takaful to power new good uses, I think just really resonated. And I think they really liked the idea of just good use of the technology, especially with something with a cultural fit too, right? Because I think that's a really wonderful combination. So that would be, I would say, is the reaction. But those two, companies with the examples I gave were the ones that resonated the most when people came to talk to me afterwards.
Thank you for the shout out.
Of course, my pleasure. Now, I love meeting great people who are really interesting entrepreneurs doing really good things with technology. And by the way, congratulations on your investment from, the Draper Venture Fund. I've met and talked to Tim before. I think that's fantastic that you were able to get investment from his fund.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, Jimmy, tell our audience how they can get in touch with you and what you would primarily like to hear from them about.
Thank you very much for that, Shireen. So I'm pretty active on social media as Murad, because that's how he found me. So on Twitter, all my handles on social media are the same. It's I am Jimmy Nguyen, Win. So I am Jimmy Nguyen on Twitter, as well as my public Facebook page. And then for those of you in the business world, the easiest way to reach out to me is actually just connect with me on LinkedIn. I get a lot of messages across all the social platforms, but LinkedIn is a really good way I can see who you are, what you do, take a look at your face, and to find out who you are, like professionally. So I think that's really, the best way to reach out to me, even though people do reach out to me on Twitter and things. But the more business people reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Murad.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and the time went so fast. It was a lot of great nuggets, golden nuggets or bitcoins shared by Jimmy. I'm looking forward, actually, Jimmy, to welcome you in Saudi. We have a great Saudi audience as well. So, looking forward to welcome you in Saudi Arabia, and definitely let's make it happen in Lahore in January.
So it's really great to talk with you both, and I'm so honored to be invited on your show. And I wish you the best of big wins for Takadao. I think what you're doing is
Definitely, I'm gonna steal your tagline. Jimmy wins. I love it, man. This is, you could not have come up with something even better. That's in your name, in your DNA. It's everywhere. Thank you. Keep it up, Jimmy. Yeah?
thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.